Hi everyone, I'm Dana and welcome back to Inverter Always. In today's video, I'm going to be walking you through a third-party device called Wago that allows you to integrate third-party equipment and other devices that are not Daikin with a Daikin ITM Central Controller. It is a very cool accessory that you can add to the ITM, and it gives you a lot of flexibility for things like on-off control, input management, switches, sensors, alarms, you name it. It's just an input-output module that gives you a ton of flexibility for third-party devices. If you guys enjoyed today's video, please click the like button below. It really helps out my channel. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. All right, let's jump right in. Now you guys, in today's video, we're basically going to be doing two things. The first thing is we need to set up our Wago itself. There's some software that we can use that gives us a wiring diagram and shows us how to wire up each of the Wago types. There's multiple types, whether you have digital inputs or outputs or analog inputs or outputs, depending on the device that you're trying to integrate with. We're going to go through all of that in today's video, and part 2 is going to be setting up all of these points on the Daikin Central Controller. Then in the next video, I guess you could call that part 3, if you will, I'm going to show you how to set up all the interlocks. That's something that's a little bit separate once all of the points have been programmed and wired. So today we're focused on just getting it wired up and getting all of the points programmed. So let's go ahead, let's jump right into the desktop. Once you guys are on your desktop, I'm just pulling up the same folder that we've been playing with through the entire series. And you're going to see this time we have a new spreadsheet. This is the Wago Input-Output Selection tool. We're going to go ahead, we're going to open up this tool. You can get this tool from your local vendor, so your distributor or your rep, or you can get it from Daikin directly as long as you have the training. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to enable macros. If something like this pops up, click Enable Content. Then what we're going to do is simply click on the Start button. Then it's going to ask us the number of Wagos we have installed on this location. We're simply going to have one Wago. We'll have multiple channels and contacts, and we're going to get to that here now, but it's just one Wago device that we're physically hooking up. Now, once we get to this point, there's going to be lots of stuff that we don't utilize in today's video. I'm really just trying to give you the basics. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually end up using method number 2. Method number 1 is something you can use if you know how many digital input points that you need, how many analog input points that you need, etc., etc. I usually like to use method 2 because I can kind of dumb it down a little bit and use more layman's terms as to what kind of device do I have. So the first thing I'm going to look at is all of the points I'm going to be monitoring. These are going to be input points. Do I want to monitor anything that is on off, a switch, a fan, etc.? Do I want to monitor something like an occupancy sensor, a key card slot, temperature? I'm going to go ahead and say that we're going to monitor temperature. That is an analog value that we will monitor on a somewhat regular basis. And I'm also going to say that we're going to monitor a humidity sensor. And that really is just so I can show you how to program each of these into the ITM. This is going to be a really good example. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go over to our command points and basically set up what would we like to command. Since this is an on-off switch and we do a lot of enable-disable on ERVs, HRVs, rooftop make-up air units, I'm going to go ahead and say yes, we're going to have a command point where we're going to turn something on or turn something off. Something else that you might have is you might have something like a fan speed manual adjustment, some sort of a knob, an analog output value. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to program one of those as well. And at that point, I'm going to go ahead and call this good. This gives us plenty of items to program. We're going to click on the next button. So now it's going to give us a basic overview of what we are commanding. You can go in here and you can change these names if you want. You can change the type of sensors that they are. So for the humidity sensor, what kind of a sensor are you using? We're going to use an analog input, 0 to 10 volt DC type of contact. For your on-off command, it's a digital output, and then it also gives you the ability to control your analog output. That is, again, going to be an analog output that is 0 to 10 volts DC. Once we get to this point, we can click on Review Edits. And here's a list of all of the devices that we're going to end up ordering for our Wago. We are going to click Finish and Save. It's going to pop up a save window, and this is going to be where you're going to save this file. We're going to click on our ITM folder that we've had, and then we're going to go ahead and just call this Wago Selection, and then we're going to save. It says, congratulations, the Wago order and wiring result has been saved. Great. We can go ahead then and we can close out of the selection tool. We're going to go ahead and minimize this. This was our as-built sheet. We're going to go back to here where you can clearly see there it is. There's our Wago selection file. So you're going to go ahead and open up that file. You're going to have multiple tabs at the bottom. Basically, you have your order sheet with the part numbers. You're going to need a basic Wago kit. You're going to need your digital output channel. Basically, it's a 2-channel contact, even though we're only using one of the channels. Same thing with your analog input. 0 to 10 volt DC contact. It's a 2-channel contact, even though we're only using one, so we'll have one spare. You're going to have your 20k ohm thermistor contact. Again, it is a 2-channel AI contact, even though we're only using one, we'll have one spare. And finally, our 0 to 10 volt output, analog output contact. It's a 2-channel contact, we'll have one spare. Then you can click on your points list. So your points list is basically showing you what you are going to be programmed. A fan speed command, a humidity sensor, an on-off command, and a temp sensor. And these names are just for reference because this is what was in the selection tool and we just never changed them. That's fine, great. We're gonna go on to the next tab. When you get to the next tab, it's gonna show you the order in which you need to plug in all of your contacts. So at the top is going to be the left part of your Wago. This is where you're going to hook up your power. We'll talk about that shortly. And then the very next contact needs to be your digital output. This is going to be your closed contact, your on-off output. Next is going to be your 0 to 10 volt DC input, and then your thermistor input, and then finally your analog output. The order matters, and it's going to be really important that you don't screw this up. The last piece, which we haven't really talked about, is the end module. This is just a cap, so don't worry about that, but you do need to make sure to plug that into the end. So what does it end up looking like? Well, it ends up looking like this. This is your typical wiring diagram, and this is the tab that you want to print and reference because it has all the wiring on it. So you'll see that on the furthest left-hand side, well, it says it's the top. I could turn it 90 degrees, but that when you're looking at the Wago, this is the left-hand side. You're going to plug in each of your contacts. And then basically what you're going to do is you're going to scroll down and it's going to show you how to wire everything in. So that is a reference. This is going to be your main Wago kit that you buy. The first thing you're going to do is address this kit to the proper port. Okay, so you're going to have port 0, which is in the 10s column, and then you're going to turn this to a 1, which is going to be on the 1s column. If you were to change this to a 1, this would be 1 times 10, so it would be 10 instead of 1. So make sure you address these rotary dials properly. Then what you're going to do is there's going to be a little connector. Basically, this is going to be your RS-45 port. And you're going to have 2 sets of connections. You're going to have 1A and 1B, and then you're going to have 2A and 2B. And you can see how this is wired. 1A and 1B go to the ITM. This is polar sensitive, so 1A has to go to the minus contact on the ITM, and 1B has to go to the positive contact on the ITM. This is that blue connector on the back of the ITM. If you do have more Wagos, that's when you would then start daisy chaining from this connector to the next connector, so on and so forth. Because we only have one, we don't need to do that. We don't need to put anything on 2A and 2B. Now, on the outside of this connector, there's going to be a little resistance terminal switch that you need to turn on. You're going to turn this on the last Wago in the daisy chain. And so because we only have one Wago device, we're going to turn this on now. And then that is going to plug in on your RS-45 connection. So now we need to hook up power. So the furthest left part of your main Wago device, I'll scroll back up. This contact here comes with the main kit, and this is going to be your power. Your power supply here is going to be your typical 120 to 40 volts. But your output from the power supply to the Wago is 24 volts DC. Super, super important that you know that this is a 24 volt DC power supply. You also want to make sure that you wire this properly. So you're going to run your DC positive to this contact exactly like it shows on this diagram. You're going to run your positive, your minus, and then you're going to run the other side of that up and the other side of that up. And that way we can power all of our strips. The next step is going to be looking for your specific contact. And it's at this point that you want to go back to your location wiring and reference the part number for each of the contacts you have. You have a 750-513/000-001. Find this digital output contact on the wiring diagram. So we're going to look for our 2-channel DO. Here is our DO. We're going to go ahead and follow this wiring diagram for that contact. And it's pretty easy. You just basically have your 2 wires that are going to basically close a contact on whatever device you want to enable or disable. And then if you had a second device, the right-hand side of this contact, this would be channel 2. So DO1 and DO2. That one's a pretty easy one. So once we've got that wired up, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to the next device that was on our list, and that is our AI analog input 750-479. So now we're going to go find that 750-479. Here it is right here, the 2-channel AI, plus or minus 10 volts DC. So here's where you're going to see that you have your AI1 positive, AI1 negative, and then on the other side, if you did have a second channel, a second device, you'd have AI2 positive, AI2 minus negative. So you're going to plug in your 2 wires here on the left-hand side for channel 1, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the next device. So it's pretty simple to get this all wired up. The next one is a thermistor 750-461. So we're going to go find that. Here it is right here, right next to it. So this is going to be your thermistor wire. So you'll see it's a little bit different here. Now we're going to go the top and we're going to skip one and go down to the next one. So there's going to be your thermistor wiring. And then if you did have a second thermistor, basically the same thing on the other side. The left-hand side is channel 1, right-hand side is channel 2. So I know that was a lot in a very short period of time. Once you do it once or twice, it isn't really that big of a deal. As long as you have that wiring diagram, it will save your life and save you tons of time in the field. So now that we have the Wago wired up properly, the next step is to add those 4 points to the ITM. All right, you guys, so here we are back on our desktop with our ITM in front of us. To program in more management points, we're going to do what we did at the very beginning of this series. We're going to go to the menu, and then we're going to go into the service settings screen. We're going to click on management point data registration, and now we're going to go in and we're going to add these 4 new points. So we're going to go to add, we're going to go to others, we're going to hit select, and then it's going to be an external DI, an external DO, an external AI, and an external AO. So it's just a matter of which one do you want to pick first. Let's go ahead and do the external AI, because why not? We're going to hit OK. It takes us back to the previous window. Hit OK again. Now there's a lot of stuff you can do with the Wago devices. I'm going to try to keep it as absolutely basic as possible for the sake of this video, just to get you guys started. If you need to do something more advanced, you can always tweak it, play with it, or contact your local rep for more information. So port number is going to be based on the rotary dial port number we programmed, which should be 1 for this example. Your on status monitor, this is a digital input. This is the channel in which you want to monitor. We're going to monitor channel 1 because we put it in channel 1 when we wired it. We are not monitoring the error status input, so we leave that as not specified. Now we need to give our point a name. What are we monitoring? Well, it's a digital input, so how about we just call it lighting? That's easy. Lighting is either on or off. And really, there's nothing more to say about lighting. In the detailed info, we'll just leave that blank. But if you wanted to plug something in, like maybe that's floor 1 lighting or floor 2 or whatever, warehouse, classroom lighting, I mean, you can call it whatever you want. We're going to leave it alone. In the icon screen, basically, just like when we added different indoor units, the icon you choose doesn't really matter. So if you want to pick this light, you can pick that light. If you want to pick this light, pick that light. Let's just pick light 4. It's really just for visualization reference. Now we're going to go to the monitoring tab. We're going to monitor and we're going to record any history because that's just what we do by default. And then we're going to click the DIO tab. Now this is going to be the point type. We're going to pretty much leave this completely alone. And that's one of the cool things about the ITM is it's kind of pre-programmed. You don't have to do a lot. Type A means that the point is going to say it's off if the contact is open. And when that contact closes and we see that closed contact on the input of the Wago, it's going to say it's on. If you want to do the opposite, where an open contact is on, you can change the point type to B. Just make sure if you do, you change the error input type to A. So whatever you have up top, the bottom needs to be the opposite. Then you're going to click on OK. You have now successfully programmed your digital input for the lighting. And so now we're going to do the same thing for the next point. So for the next point, we're going to be adding, we're going to click add, we're going to go to others, we're going to click on select, and this time we're going to be adding the external DO. This was that switch output, that enable disable that we wanted to program in for maybe that rooftop, makeup air unit, HRV, ERV, whatever you want. So we click OK, takes us back to the previous screen. We click on OK again. And we're going to do something very similar as before. We have port 1 because that was the rotary dial address of the Wago device. And this time we're sending an output signal. So the output signal is always on or always off, depending on if the contact is closed or open. And again, there's more stuff you can do with it, but today it's just basic setup. So what channel is this going to be? This is going to be channel 1 of this contact. Make sure that you don't think, well, it's the second one in a row, so this must be channel 2. No, this is the first channel of this contact type. So it's still channel 1. So now we're going to give it a name, and let's just call this ERV, and let's call it on off. How about that? On off. You can call it whatever you want. Detailed info, if you want to plug that in, great. Icon, we actually have an ERV icon that we could choose. Where is it at? Right here, ventilator. We have 2 options. I'm going to click ventilator B since it's third party. It's a little bit easier to decipher. Common 2, nothing to do here unless you want to prohibit manual operation, which we rarely do. You can do that from the main ITM screen later if you need to. Monitoring, monitor plus history, as we always do. And then you're going to set up your contact point type. Just like before, a type of contact is open means it's off. When it closes, that turns it on. So if you have a device that is, open contact off, close the contact, it turns it on, great. You don't have to change anything on here. If you need to flip-flop this, great. You can flip-flop it and flip-flop the bottom one. Then go to DIO2, and basically here's where you're going to pick the same point type that you did here. So pretty much everything here, most of the time, you don't have to program or change at all. Literally all you have to do is set up the point name, the icon, the address, and make sure you're on the right Wago port. So pretty simple to create these items. Of course, these were both the digital items. Now we're going to get in and we're going to program the analog items. So to program the analog input, the first one we're going to do was the thermistor, I believe. No, it was the humidity sensor. So we're going to click others, then we're going to go to external AI, click OK, then click OK again. And very similar to before, we're going to be on port 1. We're going to be address 1. This time it actually makes it a little bit more clear what address you're doing, channel 1. The name of this is humidity. So we're just going to call it humidity. Detailed info, if you want to plug something in here, you can. Maybe it's the humidity of, I don't know, the pool room or wherever you have the sensor located. We're going to change the icon here, and we're going to change it to humidity because it's a percentage icon. Again, it just makes it a little bit easier to decipher later. We're going to monitor and history log it, and then analog 1 is going to be important. This is going to be something you have to set up. Your unit label is going to be what you want the label to be. We want it to be percent. This is going to be what it says after the number. When you are monitoring the unit, the humidity sensor, you need to either disable or enable an automatic alarm. If I want to monitor the upper limit of my humidity sensor, because if let's say it gets above a certain percentage, then I want it to alarm. I'm going to monitor and history log it, and I'm going to change this to whatever percentage I want it to alarm at. Let's say if the humidity gets above 70%, that's probably not realistic, but let's just say if it gets above 70%, I want it to alarm. This will automatically trigger an alarm. Now you need to make sure you adjust the hysteresis. Think about the hysteresis as like your deadband, right? So how many percentage marks past this number do I want it to actually alarm? So I'll just put 1% for today's video. And what's going to happen now is it will actually alarm when it gets above 71%. And then it will stop alarming when it gets below 69%. So this is my dead band or my threshold for when it alarms and doesn't alarm. And I can do that for the lower limit as well if I wanted to, like if it got too dry in the space and it dropped, below, 20%, you could do that as well. We're not going to do that today. Analog 2 is where you're going to set up what type of sensor it is. So if it's either a temperature sensor, which we'll do next, or it's not. So here in this case, because it's not a temperature sensor, it's a percentage is what we're setting up as a humidity. Your minimum value is 0 and your maximum value is 100%. Very important here. And your number of percentage marks in decibels, I like to change this to minus 1, please. Thank you. -1. Basically, that's decimal marks. So it's going to read 75.5%, for example. Go ahead and click OK. And now we've set up our humidity from 0 to 100. The device itself is still a 0 to 10 volt device. So when it reads 0 volts, it's 0%. When it reads 10 volts, it's 100%. This can cause some confusion, and believe me, it has confused me before as well. It takes practice. So the next point that we're going to add is going to be our thermistor. We're going to do it very similar to how we did the humidity sensor. We're going to go to others, select AI, hit OK, hit OK. Now this time we're going to pick address 2, even though this particular analog input is on its own contact, because it's an AI and we've already programmed one AI, this one is going to be address number 2. So we're going to give it a name, and let's just go ahead and let's call it temp. We will leave detailed info blank. You can fill it in if you want. I'm going to go ahead and pick Fahrenheit because I'm weird and in the United States where we still use Fahrenheit. Pick monitor plus history, and then we're going to set up our unit label here. I'm just going to put degrees F. I'm not going to program anything here this time, but if let's say you wanted to monitor the upper limit of this temperature thermistor, if it gets too warm in the space, maybe it's a server room, you could go ahead and enable that here, just like we did with the humidity sensor. This time along in the analog 2 setup, I'm going to pick temperature, and it is a thermistor. You can see that the values will automatically populate here at the bottom, and I'm going to leave this as a -1. That is a 1/10 of a degree, so it will read 70.5, for example, and that is all we have to do for the thermistor. So the last thing that we're going to need to program is our analog output. We're going to do that very similar to how we've done with these other ones with a few changes. We're going to click add, click others, select external AO for analog output, click OK. So very similar to before. We're going to make sure that we check our port. It's address 1 because it's the first address on this contact card. And I believe we were going to do fan control or fan speed. You can call it whatever you want. And you can find whatever icon suits you best. Maybe a fan blade. I like it. Sounds good. Let's go on to the next step. We're not going to prohibit any manual operation here. We're going to monitor and record the history of this device. So the next thing that we're going to do is create the unit label. Let's call this, I don't know, how about RPMs? It's just, I guess, or you could do CFM. I guess it just depends on your device. So at this point now, what you're going to do is you're going to create the terminology minimum and the terminology maximum, along with the minimum of the operable capabilities and the maximum of the operable capabilities. This is a 0 to 10 volt device. So we're going to go from 0 to 10. At this point, then you need to plug in the minimum RPM of the fan and the maximum RPM of the fan. Just for simplicity, let's just leave it at 0 to 100. And of course, it will be displayed with a tenth in the decimal place. Before I hit OK down here, I'm going to go through, just make sure that everything is addressed properly, and then hit OK. It'll ask you if you want to proceed. Now, if you accidentally, I'm going to say no. If you accidentally addressed something incorrectly, when you click OK, it's going to tell you what you did wrong. Is it a duplicate address? Do you have a value out of range? So I don't want to say that you can't screw it up, but there's definitely at least a few checks and balances in place to make sure you don't screw it up. You certainly still can get your value ranges wrong. And so once we reboot, you're going to want to go through and you're going to want to make sure to test everything. So once you get back to the main screen, the ITM reboots, you're going to notice that you don't have any of those points on the main screen, and that's because we haven't created any layers or areas for those points. That's okay if you click all and then click on the down button at the top. You will see now that we have an indoor icon as we did before, a ventilator icon as we did before in earlier episodes, but now we have a DIO, that's your digital contacts, and then we have the analog contacts. So if we want to look at something, say the digital contacts, we can click on that, click down, and we can see our lighting and our ERV on off. So lighting is an input, which means we can't control it, and therefore everything's grayed out. This will turn green when that input is closed, so you could test that input now, and it will go gray when that contact opens, and basically saying, hey, the lights are turned off. Your ERV is something that we can command. This is a digital output. This is a contact closure. So all we got to do is say on, yes. And then what's going to happen is that contact on the Wago is going to close. Now, if you wired it properly, your unit on the roof or whatever device is going to turn on. If you didn't wire it properly, it's not going to turn on. So this is a good, easy way to check it. We're going to go ahead and turn it back off. It's going to go back gray to indicate that it's now off and that contact is open again. So our analog contacts, we're going to click on that and then click on down, and now we have them here. I like to click on the list button at the top. This gives me the value so that I don't have to click on each one individually. So my humidity says it's 0%, and that's because we don't actually have anything hooked up. We don't have a Wago actually hooked up, so we're not going to get any information. Same thing with our temperature. Now the fan speed is something that we can control. So if we go down to setting, we can actually change this analog value. Let's change it to 100% and say, okay, yes, let's perform the setup. This is going to change to 100%. Obviously, nothing's going to happen in the video because we don't have a Wago hooked up in the real world here. But this is basically where you would then go check the 0 to 10 volt signal coming out of the contact with your meter to ensure that everything is operating properly. So if we programmed it in, this is full speed. We should have 10 volts coming out of our contact at this time. But you guys, that's going to be about everything for today. In the next video, I'm going to go through and show you how to set up interlocks. Interlocks are very cool. You can do a lot of little things with them, but I wanted to dedicate a video to just interlocks. A lot of content for today's video. If you have any questions, put your questions in the comments below, you guys. The Wago can definitely be one of the more, I would say, frustrating things to program or wire up. So I hope that this information was helpful for you, at least to get you going in the right direction. But again, if you do have any questions, put them in the comments below, you guys. If you enjoyed today's video, please click the like button below. It really helps out my channel. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing, you guys. If you'd like to support the channel, if you've found that this content has helped you out in the field, become a member. Joining is easy. Simply click on the join button. It's right next to the subscribe button on the main channel page. There are 4 channel membership tiers to choose from, all with unique perks. Simply click on the membership tier you want to join. I greatly appreciate all of your support, as it takes a considerable amount of time and effort to bring you all helpful and valuable content. So again, I appreciate all of your guys' support. Thank you so much for watching Inverter always. I hope you all have an awesome day.